Greetings, birthing people with bonus holes. Yes, that's the current polite name for women with vaginas. I'm not joking. That's trending right now. A medical group just put that out as the suggested term. Anyway, I digress in the first 5 seconds. Welcome
Is
back
that what
to
we always do?
welcome back to Disenthrall. Today, we're going to be doing a show that is unlike most other shows that I've done so far on the channel, because we're not talking about high-minded philosophy that might apply to everyone or how the world should be. Maybe a little bit of that, but we're talking about us as individuals and how we should live our lives on our own land, where we make our own rules and from our own perspective. It's not as simple of a question as it is for some people. I would say most people. Most people defer the answers to those questions to various authorities. They defer how they should live their life to whatever their local laws are, whatever their local customs are, or more frequently, whatever's dictated to them by fiat, by their chattel slavery owning deity, whatever their God says should or should not be done, or how to or how not to live your life, is where I think most people offload this responsibility for how one should live their life. And just to narrow the scope of the discussion, we're talking about sort of libertinism versus conservatism, but not like political conservatism, just sort of, I don't know what the word is, pragmatic conservative, how to live your life, libertine or not libertine. And once we have divested ourselves of these false authorities, and once we've taken both the responsibility, once we've taken the responsibility on ourselves, to lead our own lives, we have to do the hard work of making these decisions for ourselves. And that's not so easy. It's not so easy to figure out what's best. I think, and this is a real-time conversation for myself. I was raised religious Christian, and so I have all of those preconceived notions and preconceived, disgust factors built in when I encounter libertine behavior. And it's not enough for me to just blindly go with how I've been taught or how I've been raised. As somebody who's questioned everything, even the existence of God, and found the foundations of the authority in government to be wanting, and found the justifications for the existence of a deity, and that deity being all good, all powerful, all knowing, etc., and found those foundations wanting, I'm left with the task of deconstructing, working backwards through all of my pre-existing notions to determine if each one is justified through other means, or if they need to be dismantled as well. And this is one of them. How should we live our lives? This is not a question of how should we legislate how everyone should live their life. Leave that for the statists. So I want to set, the last thing I'll say before I bring in the guests is just to set the stage as having that outside of the scope. Nowhere in this discussion are we advocating how everyone should live their life. We're talking about ourselves today. And we're talking about how we want to regulate our life on our property. We're not talking about how people should vote to control everyone, to make everyone behave how they think is right. Again, that's a conversation for the statists. So we're bracketing this with that context: consent and property rights. And then once we take the responsibility of leading ourselves, what's the best way to lead ourselves? That's the open question today. I put out a call for dissenters and proponents, people on both sides. I wanted people to defend sort of libertinism, as well as people to defend more conservative living, or anti-libertinism. I don't know what the word is for that. Conservatism feels so political, but that's not what I'm talking about. Shepard immediately spoke up as somebody that wanted to speak in favor of the anti-libertinism, let's say. Welcome to the show, Shepard.
I misspoke. Thanks for welcoming me. I believe in Libertine.
Oh, really?
Yes. I am sorry if I misrepresented myself.
Oh, well, no, it's fine, because I mean, I can take up whatever side of the conversation needs to be taken up, because I'm in the middle and I'm still kind of figuring this out for myself. So, okay, interesting. Okay, I assumed that you would be on the conservative side, on the just from what I know of you and how we've interacted in the past. I'm actually kind of shocked that I may have gotten that so completely wrong. So, you are in your personal life, are you somebody that I don't know, enjoys hold on, let me introduce the other guest first. Not even a guest, Christian, co-host. Welcome on the show. He is ready to take up and defend more of the libertine side of the conversation. So welcome, Christian. How are you?
Howdy. Oh, I'm doing fantastic. I've got a belly full of barbecue, and I'm ready to vouch on behalf of sodomy and all sorts of other things people don't like.
Okay. And of course, any of the audience that we have here in Discord, we're doing the show in Discord, which is unusual for us today, but I wanted to literally throw the doors open, and anybody that feels we missed something or wants to step in, later in the show, I think you'll be able to like raise your hand or whatever, and we'll bring you on the stage to speak. So, Shepard, hold on. There's no, hold on. I'm curious. I just got to make sure that we understand the words. You might be playing some word trick on me here to make a point, which is something that you do often. But are you in favor of, like, I don't know, like you partake in drugs and prostitution and porn, and you have like a femboy harem on your property, or
Well, it's not on my property. Christian and I trade them back and forth, but otherwise, yes. No, I believe that the libertine lifestyle, the libertine choice, is completely awesome and wonderful. And essentially what it is, from my definition, and that was actually in my notes, the first thing that maybe we ought to chat a bit about is, what is libertine? What is hedonism, et cetera, et cetera. For some of the basic definitions. But basically, I think anybody ought to screw anybody they want, as long as it's a voluntary thing. You ought to put whatever you want into your body, or into other people's body, whatever anybody wants. You go for and you do, and you be happy and merry, and you will make the choices on what you do based on what your values are and how good you are at making those values come to life, making them happen.
So this is not a discussion or a question of what should we allow people to do around us, which is kind of what that sounded like you were talking about. This is like a personal question. Shepard, why do you live the way you live your life? Do you or don't you partake in those things? And if not, why? That's what I'm trying to figure out for myself, and I want to talk through it for other libertarians that are leading themselves.
Something that you mentioned when you first put the invitation out is societal norms, biases from religion, etc. So the reason that I do not currently engage in open lifestyle kind of stuff is because I live in a very rural place in the Rocky Mountains. My highest values are, my wife and I are now in our 50s. So we are wanting to put enough pennies in the piggy bank so that we no longer have to go to work every day. And things that help that are reputation. And I live in a conservative area of ranchers, and most of them are good God-fearing folks who, I'm an atheist, so they agree with me about the existence of gods, except they are off by one from what I believe in. They believe in one, and that's Jehovah, the Lord Jesus Christ, baby Jesus. And he has made it, or she has made it very clear that you ought not to screw around with folks and have fun outside of what the Bible says. So I could care less what the Bible says or what the neighbors think, except that a reputation is the opposite of that. I do care what they think. I want them to look at me and say, hey, that Shepard is a good, solid, upstanding guy. He'll loan us his shovel and he'll come over and help brand the cattle. He's a solid dude. And if I was living a libertine lifestyle, one of the downfalls would be community/professional reputation damage.
Yeah. Okay. So if the society if you lived in Los Angeles instead of where you do, would you then have your drugs and your harem?
It would not meet my goals to have a harem or to use drugs beyond the drugs that I do use, which are alcohol and caffeine. My life partner is a female, and I think that females and males think very differently. And I have, in previous relationships and other parts of my life, from experience, I've gained this anecdotal knowledge that all parties in a situation might say swinging is cool, but there's something about a female mammal that nature kind of kicks in, and it ain't cool weeks or months or years later. And so I don't want to risk that because I've got such a good thing going. If I could be completely convinced that we would both be completely cool with it forever, then, oh yeah, I'd be all over that.
Damn. Wait, what? No. All right. Christian, like, can you kind of do the same thing? Like, tell us where you're at, where you sit, how you currently sort of live your life and why.
Yeah. So when I was first thinking about the question at hand, we'd had a little bit of a conversation beforehand that sort of prompted expanding this out. And the first thing I asked myself is like, okay, well, what is this idea of libertinism, and how much does that reflect my own views? And it depends on exactly which one you're talking about, as we've said, but just to make sure we're all on the same page here. If you want to take like the most extreme view of libertinism, something like from the works of Marquis de Sade, that's like a total amoralism, hedonism to the maximum. And I'm not sure that that's the kind of hedonism that we're really talking about, especially considering, the audience and where this is being hosted. So I looked at this from the perspective of a social, a very, almost like you could say a constrained or a reasonable, rational libertinism, of a social libertinism. And I think I hold a lot of positions and live my life in a lot of ways that is either intentionally or unintentionally countercultural. And some of these are very obvious choices, like how I react when I'm around police officers, for example, is very counterculture, especially for the area that I'm in. And that's just one possible example. There's several others that we could go into. But this has generally led me to a position of where I take as long as you're not hurting anybody, as long as you're not doing anything unethical, not only do I not really care what you do, I don't really think I have any right to an opinion on the matter, other than, other than if we were debating your preferred flavor of ice cream. There's a whole lot of implications that people will draw into this conversation that I think obfuscates it. But one last point I'd like to make before we move on. I was kind of hoping to lead into this later, but since, we may need to get to the meat a little earlier just based on who we're talking to, I actually don't think there's any difference between the motivating factors for people who prefer to live conservatist, whatever it is, lifestyles, and people who choose libertine lifestyles. I think they actually come from the exact same place. They just land in different areas, kind of for reasons Shepard was talking about. It's just a difference in values.
Okay, well, I did the same thing. So this is not me criticizing you guys, but not myself. But I think both of you started out by responding by telling me how much you cared about what other people did in these regards. That is expressly not what I'm focused on today. I want to figure out why we live our own lives the way we do, so that I can kind of calibrate some rules for myself. Yes, this whole discussion is bracketed on that point where we want other people, as long as they don't violate consent and property, we generally just want them to be happy and to live their life and to be them. But that still leaves a massive question mark as to how what's the best way we live our lives? And yes, we're in the realm of subjectivity, and yes, each of our answers will likely be different, but that doesn't mean that we can't still come up with some wisdom, some thought, and some reasoning for what's too far, what's too little, what's too conservative, what's too libertine. That's kind of the messy, difficult realm I wanted to have the chat in today. So like, and also Christian, how do you live your life? Like, and you don't have to put out as much as you want about your own, I guess, predilections or whatever. This is kind of a personal conversation because of that, but I mean, I'll go next, so don't feel alone.
Yeah, like I said, I tried to bring in at least some of that just in talking about, we're in libertarian circles, so obviously this is going to seem like big deal. We all don't like cops, but just even like again, how not too long ago, I was with a group of friends, and a police officer came up and tried to have small chat with us, and I wasn't having any of it, and everybody was like, "Why the hell would you act like that?" And it's like, well. I have these values that put me into that, because I want to enact these values in my real life, I'm going to choose certain options in my life that accentuate those values. So, how I live my life, generally, I'm quite gluttonous. I try to work out pretty regularly, and I run every once in a while to stay in shape. But I fall to all sorts of different kinds of temptations. Yeah, I mean, I'm straight, but that's not necessarily for like some repulsion. It's more so because it's on the basis of attraction. And I think that even speaks to the libertinism in some sense. It's not that I feel like it's the right way for me to be or that I ought to be that way, but it's what brings me the most joy, pleasure, happiness. And I think that's really what the focus of libertinism is that there is not going to be an answer that suits even the majority of the population as to what is going to check all those boxes for you. So it's up to you to figure out how to fill those boxes. And that's kind of how I live my life. I fill the boxes as I go. Like, there are certain social conventions that I obviously comply to for a whole bunch of reasons. Like, I wear clothes when I go out into public. I don't have any reason or desire to go nude. I'd burn in like 5 seconds. So it doesn't fit into my value box. I wouldn't do it even if it were socially acceptable, probably. So yeah, I mean, there are definitely areas where I am inside of the social norms and areas where not so much.
I mean, certainly because we're all kind of the same species and we're all generally interacting with a society that's similar. I mean, Christian and I live in the same state, so we're the society, the environment that we're in is very similar. And Shepherd isn't too far off from the Texas environment, which is also very conservative. But even if we were at the scope of like the entire country, it's still not that different. It's still kind of a Western, Judeo-Christian value-based place. So there's got to be some similarities in goals, and there's got to be some goals that suggest certain behaviors are better than others, not just on the society we live in, but also for as a species, as a member of the human species. What are good goals to have for oneself that would then allow us to derive some good rules for life? I think drugs is a pretty good place to start, and I'll toss it back to Shepherd here in a minute, but somebody that does heroin is not going to have a very successful life, and they're likely going to be significantly less happy than the average person that doesn't do heroin. So like, I think that's an example. Now, again, am I making a declarative that no one should do heroin and that we should throw people in cages? Again, that is explicitly bracketed outside this conversation. I don't want to waste too much time on it. Should we do those things? What are good rules for us as libertarians trying to live a good life? And I like how Shepherd, coming to you, Shepherd, I like how a big part of the rules has to be taking into account the environment that we live in and the people that are around us for multiple reasons. One, it just directly correlates to some of the decisions that do or do not do reputational damage. But it also, as activists, evangelists for libertarian ideas, it's also important, you know, if you're going to go into the rainforest and be an evangelist for, you know, your religion, you don't want to go in there and start violating all the local cultural norms. Otherwise you'll get rejected pretty quick. So for that reason too, like there's lots of reasons. What do you think, Shepard?
Yes, I think it all comes down to if a person is intelligent and comes to me for advice and says, "Hey, I'm thinking about using heroin, trying a little bit of gay sex, and just a couple things I'm thinking about. What do you think about me doing that?" Then I would say, "Well, will that serve you well? Let's first look at the heroin. Is it addictive?" And I don't really know, but I think people have said that it is. I've also heard 10, 15 years ago, some podcasts saying that the problem is not the heroin itself, but it is the expense of it because it's black market. And some doctors were using their version of it, and they kept right on being great doctors living just fine, even though they were using this substance. So I would have to say, I don't know enough to give good advice, but my friend asking if they should use heroin, I would say, in your community, is it legal? What's something we kind of sort of don't want to have happen, and that's getting thrown in a cage? Well, what are some things you can do to not get thrown in a cage? Don't drive drunk. Don't use any sort of drug that the government doesn't like. Don't flip off cops. Drive the speed limit. Like there are a few things that we can do to protect ourselves from the bad guys, and not using heroin is one of them. So yeah, that's choice. In my personal life, I really want to try weed. I'm 50 years old and I have never tried it once. One of the big reasons I don't, two main reasons. The main reason is I've heard that it makes you think a little bit more slowly, and I am under some stress and I've got a business to run and I got a lot of productivity to do, and I don't want anything that's going to slow me down. So upon retirement, I absolutely plan to smoke some weed. So that is one part. The other part is the advocacy. I'm a big time proponent that you can put whatever into your body that you want, and I think that me being clean gives me an extra voice. Hey, here's a former cop who says people should be able to use weed if they want to. Or is he just saying that because he's a pothead? Nope, he's never used it. He's completely clean-minded, has no bias. He's just saying everybody should be able to do what they want. So those are the two main reasons I don't. But I don't think there's anything wrong with heroin or weed if it will serve a person well. And I think that the rational person who's living in reality will really kind of look at things and say, you know, I think my life will be richer in 2 weeks and in 2 years and in 20 years if I don't use heroin. I don't know about weed, but I think heroin, you might be better off not to. You might want to check into that. And then the same thing with taking on one or more gay lovers. Will that serve you well? You might end up really liking it. Like today when I got home, the neighbors had brought over a friendship cake. And it's a kind of cake bread thing that I'd never had before, but I tried it. And I liked it. Well, who knows? Gay sex might be like that too. Kind of a friendship basic hole kind of thing instead of a bonus hole. Maybe I would just love it. So yeah, I should probably give it a try sometime. It would be tougher because I don't have an attraction going that way. But I didn't, when you first mentioned, friendship cake, I wasn't all that attracted to that either. And I ended up liking it. So I don't know, who knows? Maybe the next libertarian convention while I can climb in a barrel or something, we'll take some turns. I don't know. I don't want to rule anything out that could turn out to be as good as friendship cake.
Christian, why have you never given me a friendship cake?
I'm terrible at baking. I can give you a friendship pizza. Well, that's.
I thought you were a master.
No.
All right.
I consider myself a real master. No, so that's kind of my thinking is if it'll serve you well, if it'll make your life richer and better in the long run, go for it. If it won't, then maybe don't.
I will play the Libercon. I will play the conservative then. And let's see what you guys respond to some of these challenges. So, I have children, and I have I'll bring you in to speak here in a second, Casimir. I have children, so I have some amount of commitment and responsibility to the world and society at large that my kids are brought into. and also I'm setting an example for my kids. And I feel like that just really ups the bar and adds a lot of additional responsibility to how I personally live my life. Now, I didn't actually do what I said I was going to do and describe where I am on all this stuff. But now that I'm playing the conservative, I kind of don't want to. But I mean, maybe I should. So when I think about how society functions, and when we look at failing societies, when we look at Rome, when we look at San Francisco, when we look at New York, a lot of times, repeatedly throughout history, one of the red flags for a society that's about to crumble is libertinism. They have various symptomologies, such as transgenderism, as prostitution, as naked parades through the streets, things like that. And I guess that would be an allegory for like the naked people that were wanting to walk around recently at the Pork Fest, which caused some controversy because, of course, people go to Pork Fest and they have their kids there with them, and then they see people, nudists, just kind of traipsing around through the public event naked, things like that. So I think it's natural and normal for us, right? To look at these symptoms or to look at these acts as symptoms of a failing society. And then it's also sort of natural to look at them and say that there's some causality there. And I think that deserves to be questioned as well. So are these symptoms, or are they causal, or is it a little of both? And if it's at all causal, then shouldn't we refrain so that we slow the degradation of society and present future generations with a more healthy place to live, where they can be happier and more successful? Who wants to go first? Christian?
I can take that. Yeah. I mean, look, I'll just come out with the spiciest take. I don't really care about society. I don't wake up in the morning and go, man, let me think all about society. Okay. Let me now that I've said the spicy take, let me back up a little bit and try to make the case for this. I don't think it is reasonable to draw. Let's just, take the facts on hand and say that everything you presented about some of these collapsing societies of the past is true on its face. I still don't know if, even if we did like a thorough analysis, whether we would be able to make like a really strong determination of whether these things were causal for the fall of the society or whether they were effects of the falling society. And where you fall on that line is super important if you particularly care about society and whether or not it falls. So that's one problem. The second problem is that all societies fall. There's never not been a society that hasn't fallen unless, we're living in it right now, basically. They all will fall at some point. And I think it's easy to take a look back at some of the more notable examples and see all of this stuff that is normally attributed as some kind of, the connotations with Rome are often that it's a societal decay, where I think that's really easy from our position to say. But maybe in the moment, societally speaking, they're having the time of their freaking lives. On the individual level, everybody was living it up and it all just kind of fell down around them. That would be unfortunate. Yeah, but that's also not something in the conversation of how I'm going to live my life that draws me any real concern. Yeah.
So, like, if your behavior affected the environment I don't think you'd disagree that your behavior affects the environment around you to some degree. Wouldn't you want that effect to be positive instead of negative?
I don't think if society collapses because of anything that I'm doing that I did anything wrong. I think it's probably the structure of the society's fault more than anything. I mean, I'm not going around like collapsing banking systems and making people starve. Look, we made the joke like, what if we had like a femboy harem or something? My femboy harem is not like attributing to the starvation of, a bunch of people. It's just me living my life. And if Sure, I'll even grant if it has knock-on effects that people later can be like, yeah, okay, it was these people's actions that led to all of these negative effects. It's still it's causal in like the worst sort of way, to where any sort of blame that you could put on the people doing those actions is that they didn't actively go about supporting the way things are, which is obvious in the Libertine conversation. They're not going about actively supporting the way things are. Yeah.
That's interesting. Just to put it in perspective, would you having a private femboy harem in your house that isn't messing with anybody decay society more or less than the massive inflation that they are inflicting on us in real time? Yeah, I think that's good perspective to have. Shepard, what do you think?
I don't, I don't want to be rude to my neighbors. I want to, I'm not going to play lousy music that is annoying to them, and so I'm kind of respectful in that way. If I was going to Pork Fest and I wanted to run around nude, I'd probably say, "Hey, anybody mind?" And with my weight and age, there'd be a lot of hands that would shoot up. But assuming somebody was normal, size and appearance, I would still say, "Hey, anybody mind?" And if somebody says, "Yeah, we'd really prefer, we want our kids to remain ashamed of their bodies and to keep them hidden," I'd say, "Oh, if that sounds great, you must be Christians. That's wonderful." And I would then respect that choice. I'm not going to go out of my way to mess somebody else's day up. But I don't think, I completely agree. I think Christian put it very well. I don't think me using heroin or giving gay sex a try or swinging or whatever, I don't think that's going to hurt society. It might hurt my own relationships. And I think that's a huge issue also, that at some point it might be worth chatting about is, you might say, we might all agree here, hey, we're all buddies in liberty. You can say anything to me and I'm not going to take it seriously. And then when one of you calls me the most grotesque, fat, redheaded piece of crap you've ever seen, I go, "Hey, yeah, hey," we cheer with our beers. And then I go home and I mope for months and years. My feelings are really hurt because you called me that. And I think that's a human thing. And I think a lot of humans do that. And so I think some of the crazy sexual things that people might do, while it's a great idea, it's awesome, it's fun, it's wonderful, how will that age with both parties? I think that's a huge issue.
Okay. Well, let's open it up here to anybody that wants to ask questions or make comments. Casimir's got his hand up, so we'll go ahead and bring him in here. What's up, Casimir?
Hello. Hope you're doing fine.
Yeah, man. Good to see you. What's up?
So I want to address what was said just now about the angle of don't care about society. I find that highly suspect because just by being here in this room and by being within the circles of anarcho-capitalists and libertarians, you do express a care about society. At the very least, you want society to adopt some kind of a non-aggressive freedom ethic or politics. So in that sense, you do care about society.
Christian?
I care about the way society. Okay, this might be an even hotter take than the last one I gave. I didn't get into ethics in order to like fix the wrongs of society. I did it to figure out what I needed to do to not be immoral, to not do immoral acts on other people, because I care about that. And yeah, I talk about them and I say, hey, if you want to be moral, this is the way I think it should be done. But I don't really see that so much as I'm not really looking at this from a societal perspective. I'm looking at this from the perspective of like, you could say it's the same thing. Maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe that's a conversation to have. But I look at it as the individuals like, hey, other people are probably on this quest and want to be as moral as possible. Why don't I share what I've learned, what I've come to find, and give it to these people? And not everybody's going to like it. Not everybody's going to take it. But the ones who will hopefully get something out of it like I have. And that's the angle that I keep coming back to, that I think underpins this whole libertine thing. It's that if you're not going to get something out of it, you're not going to do it to begin with. You have to get something even out of the conservatism. So really what we're talking about, we're just all doing our particular brand of selfish, self-interested behavior.
Yes. I would not advocate here for, in fact, I would advocate against altruism, and fully support the objectivist take on this, that it is selfish of me, and it is selfish of me if I was especially in Patrick's shoes, already having, I don't yet have children. If I had children, then and I can hypothesize having children, I can already see how I cannot disconnect myself in any meaningful way as an individual from society. Besides the economic understanding that there's, and watching, a few episodes of Naked and Afraid, you quickly realize that we live in an integrated world where there's distant farmers providing food to distant scientists, and it's just impossible to disconnect because the level of survival in the world far exceeds subsistence farming, by billions of people. So there's no disconnection economically whatsoever. But on top of that, just on an individual, personal level, I want to be to gain good ideas, and I want to spread them into the future. And I'm a mortal person, so I want my teachings to continue. And having students is not as a complete experience as having children. And when I have children, they will have to have children. And so I'm already tying myself into a whole system of oughts where the society is tightly integrated. If I have children, and I hope I do, I will have a wife. The children will have spouses. The grandchildren will have spouses. And those spouses, if they're statists, then I will have worse outcomes than if they're libertarians. And it'll be a less moral society if they're statists. So in that sense, I care about spreading libertarian ideas so that there's more people of matching, political ideology. But then on top of that, there's also life outcomes. So would I want my children to live in a society where the total fertility rate is below 2.1? And it's not and it's way below that, meaning that they're not likely to reproduce. So in a few generations, my ideas are guaranteed to die out, including my genetics. I would probably, out of selfishness, I would not prefer that outcome. And that is a fundamental building block for any other moral ought, is mere survival. So if I live in a society that experiences these effects due to economic policies, due to statism, of course, I should be at least concerned about them because they're connected to my selfish desires.
Al in the chat, I think, adds to this conversation well by saying, okay, but society is a collective concept. So if a large number of individuals are doing things that harm themselves, all of them being a part of the aggregate known as society, then it could be called a cause of the fall of that society. So, Casimir, how do you live your life? What are your goals, and what do those goals dictate in terms of libertinism or anti-libertinism?
Well, I'm a complete failure, but I'm working to improve. So there's that. But I think if it's a very common statement to make by people that if I was 10 years younger and transferred that wisdom backwards, I would have started on the right path way ahead of time. But I do now think that one of the primary failures has been not self-improving to the point where I have enough resources and attractiveness and value in the market to have a wife and children, and also I have a great difficulty of believing that I'll make correct choices because I have a very dangerous position as sort of non-religious agnostic. Just by looking at outcomes, right, just by pure research statistics, I know that the only people who reproduce in society currently, under its current burden of taxation and state, are deeply religious people. These are the Amish Mennonites, the Amish and the Mennonites. These are Catholics barely break even, actually, so it's have to be more hardcore than that. Orthodox Jews are above replacement, but every other sect of Judaism, including conservatives like Ben Shapiro, like those types, they're below replacement. So even though they're nominally conservative, that seems to be empirically not enough. And so you ask me how I live my life. Well, clearly wrong, because if I cared about the fundamental basis for human life within our current, environment, I should be living like the Amish, like the beach Amish. I should be living like the Orthodox Jews. Something that's in their books, in their teachings, is at least in terms of survival, just extremely true, extremely realist. And I am disconnected from reality and has been disconnected from reality for the majority of my life in that sense.
Casimir, can I ask a question as well? Assuming that this year you meet the right gal, you have the same values, everything is lovely, you get married, you have a couple kids, and you both having a chat, and you say, you know what? We both really enjoy sex, and we both really want to try some cool drugs. How about on our Friday parents' date night, instead of going out for movies and dinner, we go out to a drug-filled orgy, and we get cabs, so we're safe getting home, but we're living this libertine evening, but you're still having 2.1 or greater children, and you're still going to, do whatever it is that you do to produce value in exchange for other value in the world. Do you think that that would be morally right or wrong? And do you think it would be advantageous or not? And if not, why not? And if advantageous, why?
I would likely conclude that I'm not sure, but I would wager on that being extremely dangerous and perilous. And that is because one of the key factors that I know empirically, one of the key things that correlates with the success of my children is the fact that people do not get divorced. So not divorcing the wife would be very important. And one of the ways that a divorce could occur is, and it's more likely, is with the increase of sexual partners. That's a very, very high correlation. So I can't ignore that fact, and I have no facts from the Libertine community that conducts that orgy. Not only didn't bother looking at facts, they don't care if that was the case. Many of them, in fact, will openly tell me that they have a nihilist approach, escapist approach to life, and they don't potentially believe even that they have to have children, or maybe they're even antinatalist in some sense. And so when these very common ethical, moral claims get combined with the data that I do have from research, why should I take the risk? Also, I have a certain causality that I believe exists of escapism. I know that if I enjoy life and moderate my dopamine intake to appropriate levels, when they reward good behavior, meaning productive behavior towards myself, selfishly, right? Then I will have like a healthy dopamine balance. Whereas if I start taking dopamine sugar, meaning like easy to enjoy things like social media or drugs, then I will potentially mess up that balance. And we're still studying how permanent those effects are. So taking the drug, it's associated with increased chance for mental diseases, where you take a gamble with your genetic material of whether you might become schizophrenic out of one dose of a drug. And also the ethic of escapism is really weird. You should be enjoying your family and your wife and teaching your children, and the value of that should sort of supersede dangerous, adventurous behavior.
Brilliant answer. I agree in most part. I think the last portion there was subjective, but it could be empirically proven as well. Very good answer. Thank you.
You're welcome. You made me think of something else. Why do we even have room for this? When I said dangerous, adventurous behavior, it connected. We are already living a dangerous, adventurous behavior. In all of this, I don't know if it's a hobby for people, but advocating for freedom and saying those things in public, everybody is on the list.
Yeah. So I mean, this is coming into focus, and it was stupid obvious, and I was just I was poking around trying to see if there was something more to be found here, but it does seem very personal goal oriented. So if your goal is to find a good wife and to have a successful, solid, stable family, then that dictates a whole list of things you should probably do and that you should probably not do. So that just sort of ratchets the discussion up a level in my mind. Then, what are some good goals to set for ourselves? And see, like, this is a new type of conversation for me on this channel. Usually we're talking about philosophy and we're trying to, make deterministic links between first principles and libertarian ends, or we're critiquing ideas and we're making very solid mathematical almost evaluations that don't have a lot of room for subjectivity. This conversation is absolutely the opposite. What are some good goals? How should we be orienting our goals as humans in the current modern time? Shepard, what do you think? Why don't we go clockwise? Shepard, Casimir. Well, we already got Casimir, so Christian after Shepard.
That is an excellent question, and I think that's where the energy needs to go. And I think that I can't tell other people. I can make suggestions. I think that financial solvency, security for some would be important. Some people like security, and as I get older, I'm one of those people. I want to make sure that bad things can happen in the world, and I still have enough money to not have to go be a Kmart greeter at age 76 because I need the money. So I think financial security is one of my top things that should be a goal. And then moving backward from that, will smoking this joint or drinking this beer help me move toward that goal, or will it hurt me achieving that goal? So I think that is one goal. I think reputation in one's geographic and other types of communities is incredibly important. And I am so incredibly filthy rich in terms of reputation because I put a lot of effort into this over the years. And there are times that I think that's probably my greatest asset in life, is that of the thousands, tens of thousands of lives that I've touched, you can go ask any of them and you're going to hear great things about me. And that wasn't an accident. That took a lot of hard work. That took really doing things right. So for me, that's a high value. That's a high goal. Reputation as a good, solid human being, and being financially solvent. And then I think the thing that you say that you repeated from someone else would be kind of the third, the philosophy, the moral thing, the thinking thing of believing as much true stuff as possible and disbelieving as much untrue stuff, and searching for truth and getting rid of bias and all that kind of stuff. I think those would be three kind of macro categories, and there are probably more, and there are many subcategories, but those are things that I think, depending on a person's values, could be worthy goals.
Christian?
Oh man, I'm really gonna sound like the hedonist here. Maybe I can have a little story time to go along with this, just to really send it home. But the most important thing I think in living our lives is that we do what brings us the most amount of joy possible, because what we're going to find is that we're here for a very short amount of time, probably most of us shorter than we ever could have possibly wanted it to be, and we have to do what brings us that fulfillment. For me, that's things like reading philosophy and negging on the government, not negging, Lord, and making fun of the government and getting into spicy debates on Twitter, and being a little more promiscuous than a lot of other people would like to be with relationships. But that also includes me being nice to people, because I think that having a group of people around you that you can have meaningful relationships is a good thing to have, personally. Now, that's a loaded answer, because what a meaningful relationship is to me is going to be very different than what it means to somebody else. But especially, like, I think that's what's going through my mind. As long as one of the reasons why I cared about being ethical in the first place is because I genuinely believe that if I am on a good moral footing, then that's going to keep negative things from at least some subset of negative things, negative interactions, bad things from happening to me. Like there is, like I was saying earlier, there is this massive selfish component to this that as someone who, is not really interested, or at least not anytime soon, in having children. I get to be a lot more individualistic and self-centered when I make these kinds of choices, and so I do that. But yeah, I think that's like a good example. Like building meaningful relationships and having good friendships, whatever those look like to you, are very important things, in my opinion, for having a good life. Because I think loneliness is something all humans feel, even the most hedonistic. So maybe that's an interesting example.
Casimir, did you have any further thoughts?
No, I agree with what Shepard listed as his. I think it were 4 goals. I generally agree with them, and the reputation was a brilliant thing to bring up because that's very, very important to me. I have more or less consistently kept the same, at least online name, and I hope to have enough power to unmask my actual name at some future point. But in our society, that's a luxury. I agree with part of what Christian is saying. That I agree that there's a healthy dose of selfishness, but there's also a sort of a ticking time that you and all every other people should be aware of. Now, men are a bit lucky. We have more of maybe more of a responsibility classically as a provider, but also more time to establish ourselves than women. With women, it's actually a very, very deceptively narrow window where they can have children without significant risks of health effects, of negative health effects, including for those children. And that's the reason why I'm going back to that, because you say it's subjective, like our opinions on the matter are subjective, perhaps, but any sort of proposed morality on top of the legal system runs into the problem of is it pro-natalist or is it anti-natalist? And I think that any anti-natalist position should be just rejected outright because it dies. It dies out biologically. And most of our enemies happen to be anti-natalists. And we also understand why the government wants to be anti-natalist, because if it can control that aspect, that core aspect of humanity, it can control society. It can bring in people who do not stand on their own 2 feet. It believes that immigrants are such people, and therefore it can indoctrinate them much easier. And so that's why we have all of these wagers by the government that would otherwise be and traditionally was very closed borders. They're wagering on open borders, which we happen to support. But we should be careful of why we're supporting it, and we should care about the outcomes. And I think it's sort of a cruel thing. Just imagine this society we're building where we know that within 1 or 2 generations, every single person that migrates to the United States and ends up living in a city is going to genetically die out, or like have a far lower chances of perpetuating themselves. Now, you might not value that much, but and then on top of that, their ideas and their culture are also under attack. So it's not just if you don't care about genetics, maybe you care about culture. That is also not being preserved.
I'm assuming by our enemies you meant communists.
Yes, I mean the communists in the government, in government, in the World Economic Forums, and in all of the.
Okay. So they're anti-natalist in that they're trying for population reduction. That's what you're talking about.
They're, but like every central planner, they're meddling with. They're like an incompetent person in the surgery room. They're cutting, but whether the patient survives remains to be seen, and it doesn't seem to be likely because we know how big scale meddling occurs. So here's the issue with libertarian. I'll wrap it up. I don't believe libertarians can afford in our current society to be openly libertine. it's a big deal because libertine attitudes, the promotion of various traditionally claimed sins, like gluttony, overconsumption, envy, and other similar behaviors. Those behaviors empower the state, and when we're criticized by right wingers, very often we're called the handmaidens of the state, because when the state needs to do something that produces weakening of extended family, weakening of these pesky moral prescriptions from our forefathers, then libertarians are right there, riding along with the state. Let's abolish everything. Reason TV is portraying like OnlyFans girls that publicly denounce their conservative parents without giving those parents any voice in the matter in that episode. And so right wingers look at us and say, well, look, they're promoting this decline in society. And yet, when right wingers want to preserve something that seems to lead to good outcomes, we're also right there opposing them. Without any reason to do so, actually, because it's their values can be expressed through our ethics, and this results in there's almost a duty in my mind for the people at PorkFest that want to run around naked, to be as inconspicuous and as remote as possible. But what I see from them is in fact the exact opposite. They want to advertise and promote this type of lifestyle, which I'll admit, in itself, it's not bad. But in a society where we have absolutely zero trust in adult males, or like in adults interacting with children, and when we have like an active attempt to subvert children by certain groups in society, it's just like awful timing to also promote nudism.
Casimir,
Nudism can be healthy.
Casimir, you could not have segued the show more perfectly to what I wanted to talk about next. So once we kind of, and I'll give Christian and Shepard, an opportunity if they have anything else they want to say about how we personally structure the rules and goals for our lives. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to say before I move on?
I think I'm all right.
All right, cool. So yeah, the next area that's worth talking about then is the smallest we that we can as libertarians really discuss or would probably have a strong opinion on, which is we as libertarians, which would be when we come together as libertarians and make an impression on the public through events like Campistan or PorkFest or Anarchapulco. How should we present ourselves? How should we present ourselves to the world as libertarians? And is there a strong argument to be made, like Casimir was saying, against, or for regulating the more libertine behaviors at these public events where we are making impressions on the world? And what are the arguments? What are the counter arguments? And I keep saying we in that stupid way because I usually really, really hate the word we, because usually I'm talking to statists, and statist we's are always non-consensual and are always government law based. But that's not what we're talking about here today. We're talking about us, voluntarily attending events and coming together around a set of rules that will be more efficacious to the cause of liberty in the world. So I think that's a good sort of second half of this conversation. Who wants to take that? What are your thoughts?
I'll jump in and I'll give an example. My friend Nathan ran Anarchapulco for a while, and a few years ago, it had been going for a while. Things were going well, and he decided that he wanted to add a nude pool and a rage room one year. And I was vehemently opposed to that for exactly the reasons you and Casimir were talking about. Is we're under a microscope. And just like any salesperson, I consider myself to be a salesman, an advocate, a marketer, a propagandist, a public relations guy, whatever names you want to throw at it. I consider myself to be that for voluntarism. And if we look at the average person, the average normie, what are they going to think of in a negative sense when they think of consistent libertarians? And they're going to think, oh, well, they're a bunch of crazy pot smokers. They're a bunch of crazy, but each thing that these people say, if it doesn't hurt me too much, I'll quit doing that. They're a bunch of long-haired, hippie, pot smoking, swinging, whatevers. Okay, can I cut my hair? Yep. Can I not swing? Yep. Can I not smoke pot? Yep. Am I required to? Absolutely not. But if I'm a salesman for a product, there's a reason that salespeople dress a certain way and speak a certain way and learn all of the sales and marketing techniques. It is to communicate to not only their direct audience, but everybody standing around watching. And I choose to take that on. I choose to take that seriously. When I go to a Liberty convention, I wear nicer clothes than are necessary. A t-shirt isn't as respectable as a button-up shirt. It's more comfortable. I wear it sometimes, but I try to look really sharp. So they say, I didn't just a bunch of dumb loser casual folks. Oh, there's some real serious business people here. So I think that there's a lot that the person who chooses to could do to really help our image.
If you ran PorkFest, would you allow naked people to walk around?
Yes, I would have a separate area, and it would be, if somebody didn't want to see it, they would never see a naked person there. People who did want to be involved could go off on their own and do it. And I don't know anything that happened, but I would imagine at some point that everybody went streaking through the quad or something. I just have to make sure that that didn't happen. I would want to be able to tell the conservative Christian, and when I say conservative now, I'm talking political. Hey, man, you ought to bring your family to this event and learn a little bit about liberty. And well, I heard there are going to be naked people there. Yep, there are going to be naked people, and there are going to be drugs. And those people have all agreed voluntarily to stay way over on the other side of the camp. You're not going to run into them. Just stay here on the East End, and I think you're going to meet a lot of really neat people. I think that's a fair way to.
So you do it. Do you do the same thing for drug use, like smoking weed?
Yes, unless I was worried about legal consequences of inviting illegal activity on my private property. If that was something that would negate the insurance policy, so that if somebody did trip and fall, they would say, oh, other people were involved in encouraged illegal activity and we're not going to cover this trip and fall thing. There'd have to be intelligent legal considerations.
Well, I'm going to keep pushing. So what about openly displaying firearms? Would there be a special area? Would there be a special area where you could do that?
Nope, I'd be fine with that.
Okay.
Subjectively.
Yeah. So what's the difference between the pot smokers that you're cordoning off and the open carriers that you're not?
It's my property. And in this question, in this scenario, it's my property, and I am biased to say that it's okay to carry tools of personal protection, but it's not okay to do something that will get me in legal trouble. And if the insurance company said nobody can carry guns openly,
no. I'm not talking about insurance or law. I'm talking about we were getting to like the impression that you're making on the world at the event. So you wouldn't want the drug people out amongst the populace. You wouldn't want the naked people out amongst the populace, but you're fine with people toting guns out in the open, out in the populace?
I am.
What about cussing? Can people cuss out in the populace?
They may, but I would sure prefer that they didn't. I wouldn't want to kick somebody out of after traveling a week to get to an event. I wouldn't want to kick them out for that, but I would sure hope that they would have the decency to know, hey, see that dude sitting over there? He's a Mennonite dude with his family, and they're kind of interested in some of our stuff. Let's kind of be on our best behavior here.
What about passionate tongue kissing?
Yeah, I don't know where that line would be.
I'm not trying to. The exact answers to the questions are not important at all to me. Yep. I'm trying to figure out the why. Like,
and then what about long, passionate tongue kissing between two men or a woman and a man? What if that woman and man had just met and swapped partners, or what if they'd been married for 20 years? It really becomes a sticky, subjective, gray area kind of thing.
So in your mind, I guess the rule set that you're working on in your mind is the line should be set such that the majority of the normal non-libertarian public would be comfortable coming to this event. Is that kind of the rule?
I guess it would depend on what kind of event, what the purpose of the event is. I think it would be just fine to have an event that is a bunch of libertarians getting together to let their hair down, and just say, we don't really care what the outside world thinks. For 1 week here, we get to be ourselves and do whatever we want to do. I can see how that exhale, that relaxation would be really handy. So if that was the purpose of the event, then I would probably allow a lot more. If
I'm pretty
the
sure
purpose
that's
of
the
the event
purpose.
was, pardon?
I'm pretty sure that's what PorcFest is for.
Yeah,
I think
then Libertine.
really. Okay. So no restrictions on anything we've talked about so far.
Then if it is purely that, then it's up to everybody to control their own behavior and know that, just like Anarchapulco, you could get a film crew in there who pretends to be everybody's friends and videotapes all of the spicy stuff people choose to do, and then makes the whole community look like absolute crap, because of things people did. So, yeah, I think crap happens.
So if it's your event, you still don't have that line. You still don't have any restrictions.
It's tough with it being my event, because I have considered doing an event and it wouldn't be anything like that. So I'm kind of starting halfway down the stream here.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks for letting me grill you.
Yeah, I don't know how I would fix, quote unquote, an event I've never been to. Yeah, I don't know where I would go with that.
You have any thoughts, Christian?
Yeah, I think I've actually been saying this for a while, so this will be interesting to talk about it in this context. But I think libertarians need to learn from the left and the power of public exposure therapy, or at least libertine libertarians, I suppose. So, let's talk about the gun thing. I like that one as an example because most libertarians agree on this. Obviously, not all, but most. Most libertarians think you should be able to open carry everywhere, and that be not just a normal thing in society, but even something you should be praised for, right? However, that's not the world we currently live in. But instead of people saying, listen, we need to put our best foot forward, and so nobody needs to open carry guns because guns scare people, and we don't need that bad publicity. The going strategy, and I think the correct smart one, based off of at least the history of ideas recently, is, okay, people don't like this thing. We're going to expose them to it until they become completely numb and it's now a normal part of society. Now, you may not want nudity to be a normal part of society, but the reason why libertarians attract people like nudists, we could say it's incidental, but for the sake of this thought experiment, the reason that they attract people like nudists is because the people who are not libertarians, who really don't like nudists, want them to go away. They don't want to ever have to see them. They don't want them to do their nudist thing. At most, they would say you could do it on your property, but again, we're getting a little bit off of their intended practice here. If your goal is to make libertarianism more palatable to the normies, again, if the last 20 years of the left has taught me anything, it's don't hide it. Don't cave to anybody's expectations of you. Do what you want. Do what you actually want, and people will adapt. They will lose their icky feelings that they get over time, and soon it'll be normalized. And then we won't even be having, we'll be thinking, Jesus, could you guys remember when we had to wear clothes at these things?
Did you make that argument related to guns because of my reasoning for open carrying? Or is that independent?
No, is that your reason for open carrying?
It's literally the exact thing I've been saying for years. I open carry not because I think it makes me safer. In fact, it probably makes me less safe, especially in dangerous areas. But I open carry to normalize the sight of a pistol on somebody's hip. Yeah.
There's a problem of false equivalence here. And I think this is the core problem with libertines. Guns equals liberty. Self-defense equals liberty. Nudity does not equal liberty. Nudity is not a requirement for liberty. Now, the right to not be oppressed on your own property from being nude, or property that invited you, sure, fine. But one of them is closely related to power in society, and one of them is completely irrelevant. Like you can fight a revolution nude, you can fight a revolution closed, but you can't fight a revolution disarmed. You can't defend yourself disarmed. So that there's like a very core difference there. However, if to answer the hypothetical, I would want visible security in those places that would check and quickly isolate people that appear like they're not fully in control. Say they're staggering or drunk while they have deadly weapons on them, and they would be getting a choice whether they want to be temporarily disarmed by the sheriff or like the elected one, right? Or whether they want to immediately leave as soon as possible. So I would have those visible manifestations of a responsible society. And I also disagree with this position that Pork Fest should be like a love fest. Highly disagree. If you want to do that, remove libertarian from every single label and advertisement. Make it like a freedom fest. A libertine fest, or make it like hedonism fest. And then, oh, surprise, surprise, we already have those. They're called, music festivals. So maybe we should separate the music festival and like the Libertine festival that has no goal of politics, of liberating people, and the effort of liberation should be its own thing that will have different gradients of freedom, but will largely exclude things that are unrelated to freedom entirely, to freedom advocacy.
Why? So, I mean, let me push back, right? So, the whole point of needing guns to be able to fight for freedom is to be able to do things that people don't want you to be free to do. And so if you have the guns, but you're obeying, all the laws and you're acting prim and proper according to society, then you're not really doing anything that you'd need the guns to defend your liberty against. And, as for the event, same kind of thing. So if you're trying to make an impression on the world about what liberty is, but you're eliminating the weird and non-standard, then you're just going to attract normies that are going to be shocked and run away when they see people being weird. What do you say to that?
In fact, I deliberately want to shock and scare away the people who want to be who are libertines for the sake of being libertine, and who I highly question why they even join the libertarian cause. It seems like they're just outlaws, and they don't. And this is why the response to them on Twitter has been always, "Oh, you're trying to be authoritarian." No, I'm trying to peacefully exclude you from society. Or you're trying to be like dogmatic, like the government or the religious guys. No, I have reasons to exclude you from society. And I'm going to do it as peacefully as possible, but I don't want to associate with you. And in fact, I want my ideology to appear as the solution to an ethical life. I want to showcase that, listen, because the Amish are pacifist, they became de facto anarcho-capitalist. And therefore, and because they're also hardworking, all of those things combine into high socioeconomic performance. Therefore, if it works for them, it should work for the rest of society. And so you can be a conservative within libertarian circles. And I know that once we have libertines owning property in a proper manner without eminent domain, they can have their libertine nakedness commune, and they can have their negative TFR, and they can have like their declining population, and there are other ills I associate with them. They can do that voluntarily within their control. I just don't understand why we have to have this tiny minority of society representing and being, in fact, invited into something that is supposed to be, that has like debates about libertarian ideas, that has presentations of this as a political thing, because we have an enslaved society. And the core way the society is being enslaved is because they believe that as soon as anarchy gets established, like a true anarchy in our sense, then society will immediately collapse. And what do we showcase them? We should showcase them that because we want to respect this tiny minority of people that have very questionable motives, then we showcase them like what they associate with the collapsed society. Now you say, oh, we should behave like leftists. Leftists openly advocate for the collapse of Western society without any concern for the consequences. In fact, they say, if I quote George Carlin, and which one of their heroes, in many of his jokes, he presents humanity as a parasite, as a tick on top of the planet. And this is not a joke to many of these ideologies. They want to remove humanity from the planet. So they're fine with all the deadly sins being manifest. They're fine with people being sexually promiscuous and aborting an unlimited number of children as a result, and not thinking about the consequences of those actions on their own psyche. They're master evaders from what makes societies work, from what makes selfish individuals have selfishly good lives. Okay, if you want that in the complete individualist, objectivist framework.
All right, let me try and repeat that back, and then I'll hand it to Christian to give his thoughts, because I feel he has some. I feel it. So, if you're running Porkfest, you're not going to allow these libertine behaviors, because what you're doing is you're signaling to the world, hey guys, here's libertarianism, and in with us are all the red flags of a failing society. Did I repeat that back in short form, Casimir?
Yep.
Okay. What do you have to say, Christian?
Man, do I want to just give more spicy takes? So
That's why you're here.
I think a part of me does want to see a collapse of the conventional Western society, because I've never seen one that works in any way that we advocate for it. I think to some extent, the Western society label, I mean, and you can dispute this with me if you want, is directly associated with things like democracies and with the rise. I mean, even before that, it was associated with a lot of other awful forms of government. But the I don't think when we say Western society collapsing, what I'm concerned with isn't like whether or not we like retain hot dogs. What I'm concerned with is whether or not like the political institutions that exist today continue to permeate into the future. It seems to be the case to me that that's pretty directly correlated with Western society as we know it. So what real investment do I have in continuing that project? I mean, like, sure, we could talk from a pragmatic perspective about how Western society is preferable to some other alternative, but I'm not advocating for some other alternative. I'm advocating that we don't have the system we have right now.
Every single innovation in anarchism was established by Western thinkers, and it's not like I have an explanation for this from a topographical perspective, why it was more likely to appear in the geography of Greece and in the geography of the Mediterranean than it could have been on the plains of like the Mongol hordes or like in certain parts of Asia. But nonetheless, this is what happened. In fact, we're living in a country that on the 4th of July, we just celebrated one of the top achievements of proto-anarchist behavior in humanity, the Declaration of Independence, which was built on many of the things that later developed into anarchism, into libertarianism, and anarcho-capitalism. So, and all of those things come from, from things that were originated by ancient Greek philosophers, by Plato and Aristotle, getting developed through most of European history, and then the most radical aspects of it migrating here to the United States and establishing in the 13 colonies some of the most anarchist things that ever existed on the planet. And all of those things were based on in some part on Western culture, specifically on the Anglo part of it, which was the common law, the beginning of the separation of the state and the economy, which occurred naturally in the British Empire. So when you
I
say
kinda wanna
that you
push
want
back
this
on this.
collapse, you want to collapse basically what the topography that established. It was later we were later conquered by socialists. We were conquered by this idea of collectivism.
I kind of want to push back on this because this is the exact same kind of argument that traditional Republican conservatives will give about liberalism in general. In this idea that like Western society is what gave us these values of like not being okay with homosexuality in public and being against trans people as a principle. Rather, that's the exact same kind of argument. So maybe to you, when you look at Western society, what you see is like the foundation that brought up all of these great ideas for you, and that's fine if you see it that way. But that's not the Western society I'm really talking about, and I don't think it's the Western society that the conservatives are talking about, because they would see us just as much. They already see anarchist libertarians as total social outliers. What do you really lose by adding in a couple more oddballs into your group? We've already got the conspiracy theorists. We've already got the health nuts. They're welcome basically everywhere. We've got the gun-toting people like us everywhere. I mean, I don't see that, okay, now we've allowed nudity. Now it's the downfall of Western society any more than any of the other things, just the anarchist position alone on top of that.
Well, I have a whole list that I made of things that I would expect a Libercon or a conservative, that I'm actually actively trying to build bridges with those people. And I believe that when I talk to them, they make many concessions. They would say things like, "Oh, I'm never going to be an ANCAP, but I understand that you're a good ally because we can have, we can build our society within your ANCAP." And we can trade with each other, even though you'll probably never want to be our neighbor, and we don't really want to be your neighbor necessarily. So for me to hear that is the perfect outcome that I seek. I don't want to tell Christian conservatives how to live their lives. I don't want them to govern me, and so I want that type of separation. I'm trying to convince them that their life is possible within ANCAP, including with ideas like covenant communities, and the most importantly, the right to exclude, and the idea that they can attract adherents just by being a shiny city on the hill. And so that is the thing that I'm focusing on, and I do believe I'm making inroads with such arguments. And then what do I get from the natural outlaws and from the libertines? I get the history of a naked dancing man showing up to the Libertarian convention and dancing naked on stage. That is a failure of advertising. It's a failure of property ownership. To allow that person, the fact that he wasn't rushed off of that stage immediately, and he wasn't rushed because people confused libertine ideas with libertarian ideas. They confused the idea that if you're free to do something, you should do that thing. We have videos that are still available on C-SPAN of various weirdos arguing that kids should have hard drugs and other quote unquote spicy takes as candidates for the old party. We have people that voluntarily raise the question of age of consent. In the 2020 election, one of the libertarian candidates completely unnecessarily and unforced raised that topic and gave a completely fumbled response.
Yeah, he's been on the show, and I've been on his show a couple times, and
he's a great guy.
It was completely out of nowhere.
Mistake.
Yeah.
However, I don't believe it's out of nowhere. I believe it should be like the religious people have taboos, and when you swear, you put $1 in the swear jar, so you get the Pavlovian response to not swear. And when libertarians don't have that for things that should be taboo to discuss with others, not because we don't have the best answers, because maybe society is not ready for honest answers on some topics. Maybe we have conventions that have to be preserved until we have scientific consensus on what to do. And we're pushing things that are unrelated. We're pushing, a lot of libertarians want to push militant atheism, meaning it's not like live and let live with religion, is they want to kill religion because it's evil. Objectivists do that a lot. Perhaps they're right, but it's not it shouldn't be part of the platform. Religious community should have the freedom to live within ANCAP.
Let me push back in one quick way, and then I'll hand it to Shepard to see if he has any thoughts. So if you had two festivals, one was Pork Fest, with naked people or whatever. And the other one was Republican Fest. Actually, let me ask that. Let me start over. So you have two festivals. One's a Republican festival. One's a Libertarian festival. What differences would you expect to see between those two, Casimir?
The fact that we advocate for the means of non-aggression, that we explain how the state.
In terms of the rules for behaviors that are allowed there. What differences in rules for behavior would you expect to see different between a Republican festival and a pork fest?
I would expect for us to. I like the idea of multiple villages. Now, I'm not sure that a naked village should be even be one of the villages, but I'm willing to grant it the possibility of being such. I want us to present this idea that that people can self-organize in private property and manage to provide security while working around with guns. And if that's similar to a Republican convention, well, maybe it's because we're all Americans, and Republicans and Libertarians on those issues have similar views. But I think Republicans are actually much more restrictive about guns in their conventions, and I expect Republican conventions to have a gun-free zone, in fact.
All right. Shepard, you've been quiet for a while. Sorry, I didn't give you an opportunity earlier. Did you have anything you wanted to say?
I do, and you guys are making such wonderful. I'm just loving listening. Thank you. And I would push back and say that we are not a structured group. We are each a lot of things. So if you say, Shepard, what are you? Are you a libertarian? I will say, yeah, but I'm also a hay farmer, and I'm also a shooting instructor, and I'm also a husband and a grandfather and a thinker and a mentor and a business person and blah, 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 blah. I go on and on. I am 50 or 100 things. And I do identify as libertarian, to be specific, a consistent libertarian, or another word for that is voluntarism. I do consider myself to be that. However, I'm not about to make rules. I don't want to make rules for our community in general. I see absolute dangers. There are a lot of things I see that frustrate me. People with lousy personalities who are very good at engineering, but they suck at getting along with other people, and they're open carrying guns and floppy nylon holsters and being rude to people. They're not helping convert anybody. Now, nice, friendly, easygoing people who are giving directions where tourists always ask, and you go hang out in that area and you have a big smile on your face. Oh yeah, no, it's right down here. And then people, wow, that person with a gun was really nice. Now, I think that is good advocacy. I do think that if we look at how the Western world has handled relationships between people who are also interested in breeding, the whole idea of lifetime monogamous marriage is just silly and ridiculous. You've got to be a pretty dang strong person to be one of the small percentage that it actually, quote unquote, works for. Half of them in divorce. Of the remaining 50 couples, a bunch of them are living in unhappiness, unfulfilled. They still want other stuff outside of it. And I don't blame anybody at all who says, hey, we've looked at this other way you guys have been doing things, and we're wondering if maybe there should be 3 wives and 1 husband in each mating family group. And somebody else says, I think there ought to be 2 husbands and 1 wife. Let's try it. I'm all for people trying all kinds of cool stuff, and maybe we'll decide that the perfect ratio is whatever. It's certainly not what historically has been done in a structured way. So we can't really look at it and say, well, historically, 3 husbands and 1 wife is the best way to go. Or just swapping out every month, move 1 house to the right, ladies. I don't know. But anybody who's voluntarily willing to try that stuff, I hesitate to stop them or encourage them not to. And if one of the things that they describe themselves as is a business person, a mentor, a grandparent, a libertarian, I don't think all the grandpas ought to get together and say, no, you can't consider yourself part of the grandpa group, or no, you can't be a business person if you're doing this. No, you can't be a libertarian. Now, I do kind of agree with Casimir. If the person is saying, I am a libertarian, therefore I have 3 husbands and 1 wife or whatever, then that is not true, because that is not what libertarianism is about. But it's also not against that, I would say. Individuals within it might be. But maybe I'm just being more casual and loosey-goosey about everything. And I'm willing to take the hard hits that come with that unregulated in-group.
Okay, I'll give Casimir an opportunity to respond to that. And right before I do, I'll just say last call for anybody. If you'd like to join the conversation, ask a question, pose a challenge, or give your opinion, go ahead and request to be a speaker now, and we'll get you in here in a second. Casimir, I'll go ahead and let you respond to Shepard, and then we'll go to Christian, and then we'll see if we bring somebody else in after that.
I'll try to be brief, which is difficult. I think that I have arguments, like this is an entire separate debate over why Western monogamy actually does work, and why polygamy will likely not work. And I would see that it's very causal to the development of those societies, why it functioned. But I think it's actually sort of almost irrelevant. What PorcFest should be demonstrating is that the current American society has a third choice. Now, one of the choices that we have is the leftist progressivist socialism that we've had for over 100 years, since 1913, and possibly from a little bit earlier. And centralized government, probably from Hamilton, right? So we're providing alternatives to that. But it's the majority of the country that does tend to have more conservative views on most topics. That we are providing the means by which they can achieve those goals, those ends, without fighting each other. Whereas every other ideology is basically a warfare ideology. Democrats are fighting. They want to conquer the conservatives. They want to conquer their children quite actively and openly. Conservatives had a history in the United States of trying to do the same thing, of trying to bring their own indoctrination into the classrooms. And because everything is centralized, that's your only option. So we should be in favor of decentralization. And things that are weird experiments that were not tested in Western society should be set aside as unimportant distractions from the fight for freedom.
Christian, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I just think I think anybody who is so perturbed by seeing a nude person that they would be like, wow, this anarchism shit, it just will never work, has to have the premise that these people cannot be allowed anywhere near me, right? Which you could argue one of two things. Is either coming from a place of ignorance on how libertarianism actually works, and that, yeah, you would totally be able to set up a community to where you didn't have to interact with these people, or that they have no intention of doing that, and that they are just interested in getting everybody to conform with their preferred values. I want to exclude those people from getting into libertarianism because we have enough waystation people and grifters. I'm totally fine with using this time to casually influence society on all of the weird and wacky things, anarchism, open carry, whatever it may be, that comes with freely associating with people who you may oftentimes disagree with. That's, we could argue whether that's good strategy. I think the left has some pretty good indications that it at least works in spreading the ideas. But, I suppose to a certain extent, time will tell. I think there are a lot more people genuinely with Casimir's view. Things like PorcFest are an anomaly. And libertarians seem to have moved into a position of putting their best foot forward. I think, there's a certain kind of disingenuousness with that. And I'm not trying to be mean, but that if you're always putting your best foot forward, people are never really getting to see what you are really like. I could see a lot of people being brought in by clean cut, very by the book libertarianism and feeling instantly alienated because of the people who actually are libertarians. They have no community, they fall out, etc. Because these are all very important things. I'm very much a fan of the big tent style. None of these people will catch any flack from me, and I think if we want to debate strategy, that's fine. But it does kind of, to me at least, it feels a little ancillary to what's actually causing a lot of this strife to begin with.
Okay. Anyone else want to say anything before I wrap up?
I'd like to respond to this. I think it's very weird when nudism, and I think you should have a separate conversation of, I'm not against healthy nudity. I don't believe that you can have that in current society without raising eyebrows, because you're not willing to do what it takes to make that safe. You're not going to run background checks. You're not going to figure out who's who. And so you might end up with a very embarrassing outcome that damages this idea that what you're fighting for. And instead, it seems like it keeps coming back to libertines being true libertarians. I reject that. If I go to PorkFest with a test of are you a true libertarian, I would and it's like an ethics test. I would expect 90% of the people there to fail, to not be able to properly defend the NAP, not be able to properly define it, to not be able to answer basic questions. People who are very relaxed, the attitude is of the majority of people I speak to, and I see in the comments, is the natural outlaw. I just don't want to be told what to do, man. And it's very good for that to be the core of an anti-statist movement initially, because going against the state is a bit insane. But if you want this movement to expand to some kind of a size that can influence society, it would in fact have to become abnormal. People who want to destroy Western society and say that openly, they have to become the freaks. Should we have some? Sure. Are you free to do so? Sure. But don't conflate this freakishness with the idea of freedom. In fact, most people are vanilla and should remain vanilla because vanilla survives, and freakishness is an experiment that might fail. We can't run that experiment on the entire libertarian movement.
Well, you're making a good case. I have many thoughts.
I mean, I know we're on
Go ahead.
last words, but
no. We can keep going if you guys have time. If you guys have important thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're closing down, but I just want to make sure that my real point here is clear. It's like normal's been tried, and normal is democracy. Normal is these massive state structures. We are the abnormal already. So like, there's no point in pretending like we are some natural. Maybe we even are a natural offshoot, but nobody else sees us that way. So that's really. That was what the whole point of my ending statement was to draw that into perspective. I think I really do think that the exposure therapy of libertarians have been around this long is the only reason that things like PorkFest exist. This normalization of it, I think, is generally a good thing. And yeah, I won't recap my whole statement.
Christian,
again,
can I ask you some things?
Go for it.
Would you consider America prior to 1913 more or less anarchist?
Prior is compared to now, I'd say more.
It used to be more anarchist, right? We used to have mutual aid societies; those were gone. We used to have people like Vanderbilt that could destroy free monopolies within one lifetime, free government monopolies. That's gone. Now you have to be like a giant state-funded corporation. So we're sliding down. In fact, anarchism is normal in the United States. We used to be a more anarchist society than the rest of the world, and now we're being dragged kicking and screaming towards USSR style statism. So in fact, every time I speak to people, I say, no, look, private fire departments things were normal. in Great Britain. They were normal in the United States. They're normal right now if you look for them. Private roads are normal in France. Private nuclear reactors are normal. They exist in various places. Private, militaries even exist and can be controlled and can be fine. Private security. So, in fact, yes, it is abnormal to be socialist in the United States.
Okay. What I will say is that the way that these people got all these things through, yes, it was with the hand of government being involved, but it started with normalizing their ideas. The reason that local fire departments got put everywhere is because people these private fire departments got replaced by the public volunteer system, or even public fully funded systems that have in some locations, is by the normalization of those ideas. People put together successful, relatively speaking, peaceful, non-combative instances of public usages of firefighting. And I'm not saying these are good things, but they made examples where these things didn't completely fall apart on themselves. And then they said, okay, now we can apply this model to the rest of the world. And if a bunch of gun-toting, nudist, health denier weirdos can get together and have peaceful interactions with each other, well, that's just about the widest breadth any group could really tie themselves under. I don't know. I mean, you don't see liberal groups getting together with this disparity of opinions. You don't really see conservatives getting together with this disparity of opinions. It seems to speak to the overall success of the society that you can get so many people with so many different ways about how they could live their lives together in one place. I don't know. I think, we could say it's more anarchist back in 1913, 1912, before that, even in the 1800s, etc. We would both agree it's definitely not anarchist, but I can't. If anything, the spread of these leftist ideas, I think, it goes to my point of their methodology being efficacious. But I don't know.
I share a concern that Casimir mentioned. I think that it's a similar thing. I was offended by Anarchapulco being called a anarcho-capitalist convention, because maybe 100 or 200 people that were there, if you ask them half a dozen easy questions about anarcho-capitalism, they would be able to answer them. So maybe 100, 200 people each convention that were anarcho-capitalist. I wish it had been called the Acapulco Alternative Festival. And if that is what Pork Fest is, maybe Pork Fest is a great name. I think if somebody said thoughtful libertarian philosophy meeting, then I wouldn't like to see nudity there. But if a bunch of fringe folks want to get together and play and have fun, then I'm not opposed to it. I am offended when they put my trademarked copyrighted name Liberty or Libertarian or ANCAP or Voluntarist to it. But then again, they're welcome to call it that if they want to, I guess.
Well, they have a market advantage in that they have a large group of concentrated libertarians there by design. And so what they do reflects on the rest of us that are using those labels. And we're allowed to have opinions on that for sure. Do I wish they would do it differently in some areas? Of course. I also think that it's on us to also start our own. A good example is there is no Liberty event like what we did for Ancampistan last year. I thought that was fantastic. It was totally unique, and I hope that we do it again. It got rid of a lot of the sort of hippie vibes and woo stuff, and focused on self-defense and training and friends and relationships, camaraderie, and good times. And I think that's sorely needed. So maybe the answer is just we need to compete and do it better rather than complain. And maybe that's the lesson for ourselves too. We live our life in the way that we think is best, and we, rather than complain about how other people are doing it, we set an example for the people around us of what we want the labels that we put out there to mean. So when I tell people I'm an anarchist, I am sharing the good reputation that, for example, Shepard works to build. I'm lending my reputation for being honest and trustworthy, dependable, hardworking. I'm lending all of the attributes about my life that I work really hard on to the label of anarchist or voluntarist when I do that. And that might be the strongest point of activism that each of us can do, is just to, you know, if you're going to walk around using these labels that you care about, make sure you're putting a good reputation on them. Yeah. And I mean, to speak to the other side, right? You live your life. You're only around for a short amount of time. Your existence is very limited. Be happy, make good decisions, extend your existence to the degree you want to, and enjoy it to the degree that, I guess, makes sense for you. All right. Well, I mean, those are my final thoughts. This has been a very interesting conversation. Like I said, don't normally do podcasts on wholly subjective topics like this, but I thought it was, this is an interesting, important one to me, right? So I'm at this inflection point in my life where I'm reevaluating lots of these things and deciding how I want to live the second half of my life here. And, yeah, this is very timely for me. So I appreciate everybody's perspective on that. I'm happy to go around and give everybody the last word if they have any final thoughts. We'll just go Shepard, Christian, Casimir, and then we'll wrap it up.
The three of you have been awesome to chat with. I've learned, I've grown, I've blathered, but it's just been a pleasure chatting with all of you. Great points all around, and I love thinking with y'all.
Awesome. Actually, Casimir, why don't you go and then Christian?
It was a pleasure to participate. It's interesting to exchange these ideas. And I think we should have another talk about that word subjective that keeps coming up. I think it can be a little bit nudged a little bit to the side or contextualized. And thank you for inviting me.
Hey, we'll do that tomorrow. We'll have another one of these. This is fun. Christian?
Oh yeah, thanks for having me to air my shit takes that I'm sure most people will find reprehensible as always. So
I just want to know the names of your femboy harem at this point.
I'm sorry, that's strictly confidential.
All right. Thanks everybody. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening, and you guys are awesome. We'll talk to you soon. Oh, wait, the Disenthrall thing. Whoa, I never remember.
Thank you for listening to Disenthrall.
No. There's the
okay.
official outro for Disenthrall. Oh, you've been disenthralled.
Oh God! You know it hurts every time, and I think that's why it has to say
every single time.
It never. I've never not cringed hearing it, which is why I think it needs to stay.
All right.